I would like you to set aside for a moment, if you can, the question of whether Trump's war in Iran is unconstitutional. Set aside whether it's immoral. Both of those things are true, but we can set them aside. Just look at the operation itself and ask yourself a very basic question, a question that you might wonder if the people in charge even asked. Did they plan for any of this? Because the answer, based off of all recent reporting, appears to be not really. No planning, no serious planning at the very least, no planning beyond the tactical and operational planning. The Trump administration did not plan for Iran to target shipping and close the Straits of Hormuz and to give itself essentially a toll booth on the straits, affecting global trade, especially trade in petroleum and petroleum products. Related to that, the administration did not plan for an energy crisis or the disruption that this war would cause to the global economy. The administration didn't plan for its European allies to say essentially no thanks to trying to help. This has angered the president quite a bit. He says that we no longer need NATO. He seems not to understand that NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is not an offensive alliance, but a defensive one. And notably, Iran did not attack the United States. We started this war, not the other way around. In fact, to read about the White House's decision-making process is to discover that it did not plan for or even really expect most of what now defines this war, which raises two obvious questions. What did they plan for? And what did they think was going to happen? It appears the president and his team expected basically something simple: token resistance, essentially what happened in Venezuela at the beginning of this year. The quick collapse of the Iranian regime, followed by the installation of a friendly government, maybe, and then a quick return to the status quo. Very simple stuff. Of course, that fantasy is now collided with a harder and much more complicated reality, and Trump can't really explain his objectives. When asked about it on a Fox News radio interview a couple weeks ago, Trump said he would feel it in his bones when he knew that the war was over. Feel it in his bones. His bones. That is not a wartime strategy, certainly not one that we've seen from presidents past, to put it very lightly. Unable to figure out what to do next, Trump is very clearly caught in a classic escalation spiral. Everything he does doesn't have the desired effect. He steps up airstrikes and the Iranians don't back down. He threatens to destroy critical civilian infrastructure like the desalination plants, which I'll note is a violation of the Geneva Conventions, and Iran doesn't back down, doesn't preemptively surrender. Now we're staging ground troops for some sort of operation that may last weeks or even months. And this, it's clear the president thinks will force the Iranians to bend to the might of the great American soldier. There seems to be no recognition from the president or from Pete Hegseth that there is more to war, more to winning a war than just overwhelming force. Perhaps Hegseth could study some about past conflicts when he is not too busy praying to whatever God he prays to for maximum violence and lethality to be delivered to America's enemies. I'm not making that up. That's literally what he prays to in public events held at the Pentagon. That's a separate video. We got to discuss that. That's a whole separate thing to talk about. All the while, all as he escalates, Trump swings between bragging about an imminent deal and then threatening further attacks. It's kind of pathetic to watch. It's reminiscent, in fact, of how the president responded to COVID, trying to bargain with the virus, trying to make deals with it, promising one thing one day and something different the next, both in an attempt to manipulate markets, because it's the thing he cares about most, and to save face as he confronts something that doesn't respond to the usual mix of cajoling and bullying and the like. What's striking about all of this, though, is it's not just an Iran thing. It is a pattern of behavior from the administration. The White House, the president, did not expect the public to be repelled by Doge. They really did not. And it's why Elon Musk was shuffled out of there as quickly as possible. They did not expect the public's outrage over Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was whisked away to a foreign prison for the crime of really nothing. He had a legal order to be in the country. They did not expect the kind of backlash that came. People got wind that mass deportations really meant mass deportations. The administration did not expect Democrats to respond to threats of extreme partisan gerrymandering by doing it themselves. I live here in Virginia, where we're voting on a referendum to change the maps to basically obliterate the Republican presence in the House of Representatives. Republicans, and Trump in particular, did not expect Democrats to respond in kind. They didn't expect the mass mobilizations against the National Guard deployments, against ICE and against Customs and Border Protection acting as a roving paramilitary force. They are baffled by it. They still are baffled by it, still baffled by the anger, still baffled by the willingness of people to put their lives on the line to challenge occupations of their cities and their neighborhoods and their communities. It is beyond clear that Minnesota caught them off guard, that the public's supportive reaction to the people in Minnesota caught them off guard, and the public's growing anger towards ICE has caught them off guard. Kristi Noem would still be Homeland Security Secretary if they could anticipate the kind of reaction ordinary people might have at seeing people gunned down in the streets. At every turn, the administration seems to operate on a baseline assumption that the people they oppose will be docile, that they won't ever push back, that they'll just sit back and accept it. I've described in the past the ideology of the president as being akin to that of a rapist, and you sort of see that here. This idea that you can attack and assault people as much as you want, and they'll just do nothing. They won't resist. So why can't the president, the White House, their allies see what almost anyone else could have predicted? I think the answer gets to something fundamental about this president. We got to think about his psychology here. And I know that's not always the most fruitful path for inquiry, but I think it matters here. I think the psychology of the president matters quite a bit here. Trump is famously indifferent to the people around him. He is a consummate narcissist, perhaps the most narcissistic person to ever occupy the office of the presidency, which is saying something about an office that often attracts narcissists. He is, without question, the most solipsistic person to ever occupy the Oval Office. He just doesn't think other minds exist, period. This is like a clear thing about him. Over his many decades on the public stage, there is actually no evidence at all, like whatsoever, that he genuinely believes that other people have inner lives, that they have their own perspectives, their own agency, their own will. He certainly does not believe that people can be motivated by things other than greed and avarice and desire and self-interest. The idea of selfless motivations, the idea of sacrifice just doesn't compute to him. It's why, for example, he's always been so contemptuous of soldiers. He doesn't understand why anyone would do it. Every presidential administration takes on the character of its principal, and this one is no different. The White House sees itself the way Trump sees himself, as the protagonist of reality, the only real person in the universe, some kind of world spirit. Everyone else is a supporting character. Everyone else is an extra. No one else has any will of their own. It's all just a sea of NPCs. I know I don't have to say non-playable character because this is for YouTube. You people know what that means, but I'll say it anyway. Non-playable characters. And so whenever other people act, right, whenever they exercise agency, whenever they resist, organize, retaliate, refuse, both the president and his team are just caught completely flat-footed. They don't know what to do with it. This blindness is a profound vulnerability, abroad, at war, and at home as well, with political opponents. The president and the White House's inability to grasp that other people have agency, its failure of any kind of theory of mind, gives their opponents a real structural advantage. You can almost seize the initiative against them, knowing that the president will struggle to respond in any kind of coherent way. We've already seen this. The partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, Democrats refused to fund ICE or Customs and Border Protection, has produced chaos at the nation's airports, so much so that Senate Republicans basically cried uncle and agreed to something that would end the pain. House Republicans refused. The president refused. The president refuses because he thinks he can kind of bend reality to his will, that his stubbornness will always win out. But here's the thing. He's simply not the only person who exists. His agency isn't the only agency that matters. And now he's stuck in a real political disaster. This is the thing I feel like I'm trying to emphasize again and again and again, and I have been emphasizing throughout this Trump period, that he is dangerous. There is no question of that. His aspirations are despotic, his aspirations are tyrannical, his appetite for violence is real, his desire to terrorize the country into submission is an established fact. But he is also, in critical respects, a weak president. He does not know how to utilize the executive branch to its fullest extent. He does not know how to negotiate and work with the Congress. He does not know how to respond to political adversity, how to deal with actual obstacles in front of him. His only move is to try to barrel through them, to try to dominate what's in front of him. This has left him deeply unpopular and very vulnerable to all kinds of political maneuvering. His narcissism, his solipsism, his impenetrable egoism, these are not just character flaws, although they're massive character flaws, like perhaps the biggest character flaws people can have. They're also strategic liabilities. They mean that he cannot see that his opposition can act. He cannot see that his opposition is real in the first place. And for that opposition, for his opponents, this failure on his part is an opening to do real damage. And I hope they take it. Thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, consider this one and think about giving the page a subscribe. I like seeing the number go up. Talk to you later.